So back in September, the sailing committee assigned a working group to look at some of the issues facing the club, looking at the governance and looking at some of the rules that might hamper us in the future if we wanted to start to look and adapt the way our club is going. To help this, we had a series of RYA workshops and development webinars aimed at clubs like us to adapt to this changing world. We used the RYA club development model, which I'll take you through in a minute, and now have started the discussion with the club management committee. So some of the areas for consideration in the new year. Let's look at the members and participants. The RYA conducted their largest survey of UK clubs in the last 12 months and have done a lot of research. And we've also had the opportunity to learn from the successful clubs, and some good case studies are available, and some of those are on video, and you should be able to pick those up off the RYA website. But these clubs have looked at how they can improve member satisfaction. And they've got a situation now where they've identified that if members are satisfied, then they're more likely to renew their membership, recommend their club to others, stay with the club when things go wrong, and tolerate shortcomings. And just as important, more willing to volunteer their time. We've also learned how these clubs have increased overall participation at their clubs, and how these clubs have improved their recruitment, but just as important, their renewals process within their club. So from this survey, we've gained an understanding now of the key factors and drivers of member and participant satisfaction. And these successful clubs have looked at all participants, not just the active members, the members who race, but also the less active and non-active members within their club. Plus, they've looked at members of the groups and or partnerships that they have, parents of juniors that come down, but not necessarily members, open day visitors and open meeting visitors, plus members, extended families and friends. And from that, the survey also identified that however good these clubs are, that on average, clubs in the UK are losing about 8% of their members each year. However, we look at ourselves, in 2019, we lost 20% of our membership. And then in 2020, this year, we've lost 44 members. That's 26% of our membership. So our first area for consideration is, could we do more to satisfy all of our members and all participants of our club? And then we look at activities. We have seen fundamental changes in society. There clearly was a sailing boom in the 60s, 70s and 80s. And our club saw that as well, with some real heavy participants, especially in racing. But since then, dinghy sailing and racing has been gradually declining in the UK. But some of the successful clubs in the UK have adapted and have diversified their offerings. These clubs have seen significant growth in their membership during the pandemic. In fact, one club in the Midlands, who had a membership of around about 500 people, had a growth of 100 plus people this year, but not just from sailing, but more from other types of water activities, paddleboarding and kayaking. In fact, paddleboarding, stand-up paddleboarding, is now one of the biggest growing water activities in the UK. Kite surfing and windsurfing, open water swimming, even art groups and outdoor yoga and Pilates. And what these clubs have also started to see, especially in the water sport activities, is that some of the members have started to transition into sailing. But also, some of the sailors, traditional members, have also been trying out the other water sport activities and actually enriched the participation at their clubs. So the second area for consideration is, could we benefit from embracing and growing more diverse activities and groups at our club? Our successful clubs have started to understand the needs of their members and participants, especially with this new diverse activities that are now being offered by themselves. And they're adapting their facilities to meet the new requirements. And they're also investing in new resources to complement the new diverse activities. But quite interestingly, all of these clubs have introduced a dissolution clause into their club constitution and have accessed a lot of public funded money or lottery money through Sports England. And that brings us on to governance. Now, governance is how are clubs governed and what are the rules? And this is what we looked at as part of the working group, is what are the rules we've got in our club that could act as barriers to try and, when we decide that we do want to develop and adapt our club. So, do we need to adapt? Now, if you asked our members a couple of years ago to describe our club in one sentence, a lot of people would just say, we are a dinghy racing club. And quite clearly, our first rule and overarching objective of the club states that. It states that we encouragement of sailing and yacht racing. In fact, our behaviours have always been around racing. Our annual calendar up until this year, prior to this year, was always been around our racing calendar. And our duties, where all our members are strongly encouraged for racing. So not counting the members of our three groups, the police, the scouts and the sea cadets, we have 169 named members in our 2020 members handbook. And when you look at that 169, only 36% of them have been engaged in racing in the past 3 years. And interestingly, we've had 44 members leave the club this year, and we don't know why. We haven't done any investigation at the moment, but only 3 of those were engaged in racing. So were we satisfying the needs of the other 41? In fact, the 13 new members we've had this year, only 4 of them are currently racing. So our third area for consideration is, does our overarching objective of the club and the behaviours encompass everything we are now? Clearly not, because all the training that we get involved in. But not just now, what we could be in the future. So, do we need to adapt our activity offering on and off the water? Do we now need to look at introducing a dissolution clause like other clubs have done to enable access to public funding? Do we need to look at the way and adapt the way that we vote on change and consider a more flexible approach? Do we need to look at adapting our fee and subscription structure? Do we look at the way our groups and our partnerships are engaged in how we run the club? Do we need to look at the way we market our club and recruit new members, and the way we administer the club, and how we communicate and engage? And a very important process is how we renew membership on an annual basis. So the fourth area for consideration is, do we need to create more flexibility in our club governance and rules? On the RWA model, it then looks at your priority. Your priority really is the plan of action. What are you going to do? So the outcome of this year's SGM has increased racing participation. It's gone from 7.1 in 2019 just over 8 in 2018, but this year we've had a 70% increase in participation, going above 12 dinghies per race, which is really good for us. And that's been done by looking at some of our club rules and being more inclusive to those who race. However, membership has reduced. It's reduced from 184 2 years ago to 169 to 139 this year, and only 36% of those are engaged in our overarching objective of racing. I'm not going to hide the fact that management committee discussions, especially around governance, has been difficult. And of course, this means that when we open it up to a wider group of our membership in the new year, it too will have differing views on what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. But we do need some direction. We do need your help to achieve a clear and collective shared vision of where we could be and where we would like to be as a club. And then from that, we can then plan what we need to do and prioritise what we're going to do first. And just as important, then mobilise the volunteers to make the plan happen. And that's potentially our dilemma now. From the latest RYA club survey, we've now learned that over 80% of the clubs are now saying that a lack of volunteers is now their biggest issue, with 80% of the effort being done by 20% of the members. And we, as you've seen this year, have had some brilliant volunteers. And without those volunteers, this year wouldn't have been anywhere near as successful as it was. But the demographics of the UK and the demographics of our sport is suggesting that 55-year-olds and above are propping up the clubs, and the slightly older baby boomers are getting less active. And also the way people have volunteer has changed. People have less time to do it, but not necessarily unwilling to do so. And that's what the survey suggested, that over 50% of members of UK sailing clubs would be willing to volunteer more. So our fifth and final consideration is we now have 25% less members than in 2018. So how can we prioritise our volunteering efforts? Where best to prioritise it, where best to put it, and at the same time, rather than working harder, how can we work smarter? Now, this picture has 5 boats, and one of them going in the completely opposite direction. That just happens to be Steve Bellamy. I'm not suggesting he's going in a different direction to the rest of us. But the important thing here is that one thing we need to do in the new year is gain consensus on an agreed course to steer. And the plan is that once we get the discussion going with the management committee again, we would like to start some consultation with our members in February, and before the season starts, we would hope to run a possible special general meeting to make some adaptations to our club rules and also to some propositions around a clear way and a clear course to steer. So what I'd like people to do is to help me pull together the views of the rest of the membership before our next management committee in January. And I would appreciate any views, any comments, any ideas, and especially around the 5 areas for consideration that I've highlighted in this presentation. I will send an email out after the AGM, and you can bombard me, and I'd love to be bombarded with your views, comments and ideas and suggestions. So thank you for listening.